Hi, I'm Madison Allworth with YTV, and I'm joined here today by Sebi Medina-Tayac. Sebi, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here.
Great. So today we're going to talk about immigrant rights here in New Haven, and I'd like to start by asking you how New Haven is doing in terms of undocumented immigrant rights.
Well, first of all, New Haven has a huge undocumented population and has become kind of a national leader at the forefront of progressive immigration policies and reform at the city level. A couple things to look at would be the Elm City ID program, which was instated in 2007, which issues undocumented immigrants forms of official identification that they can apply for bank accounts with and access city services with. That's really contributed to a sense of belonging into the city, a sense of integration into urban New Haven society. Another thing that's made New Haven pretty radical in this respect has been the general order to the New Haven Police Department to not report the immigration status of non-felony offenders and people who report crimes, which has made people feel a lot more comfortable with calling the police and has in turn increased public safety in these immigrant neighborhoods. So those are just a few things. That's at the municipal policy level. Now, New Haven's neighborhoods themselves are vibrant with culture that undocumented immigrants contribute to these communities. And there's a huge proliferation of immigrant advocacy groups in New Haven. So New Haven's really at the forefront when it comes to this issue.
Great, so you keep talking about how we are at the forefront of this issue. And so what I would really like to know then is where does the support come from for immigrant rights here in New Haven?
Well, New Haven has like a very long history of being a haven to immigrants from the Great Migration in the early 20th century to the post-World War II boom. We've had huge influxes of immigrants from around the world, including Europe, Latin America, and the South. And that's due in part to a lot of the economic opportunities and just actually the welcoming nature of this city. Like I said, there's huge amounts of civic activity going on in support of immigrants. And in recent years, it's actually been Mayor DeStefano who's on his way out. He's been a huge national and international advocate for immigrant rights. He pushed forward the general order, he pushed forward the Elm City ID program and a few other municipal policies that have really brought him on the side of immigration reform. And he's actually come under some fire nationally for it, but he's always taken a stand in support of immigrant rights.
Yeah, so I actually want to talk a little bit more about, we talked about Mayor DeStefano, and now, like I said earlier, the mayoral election is coming up. So can you highlight and talk about what the track records of the two candidates are in terms of immigration reform and immigration rules and regulations, and also what their ideas are if they were to be elected?
Well, whoever is elected has pretty big shoes to fill. That's for sure. I was talking about the legacy Mayor DeStefano leaves behind. Both candidates seem very adamant about continuing the programs that have been really successful so far in New Haven, including the Elm City ID. Tony Harp at the legislative level in the Connecticut Senate has actually worked pretty hard this year, specifically with immigration reform. She just co-sponsored and pushed through a bill in May that allows undocumented immigrants to apply for and receive licenses, which is putting a lot more safe drivers on the road and ensuring a lot of vehicles, helping people get back and forth to their jobs, because that's kind of a reality that that Connecticut faces. Another thing, she was very involved with the 2011 Connecticut Dream Act. So it's safe to say that at the state level, Tony Harp has been working really hard for immigration reform. Now, as far as Justin Elicker is concerned, he also has a strong track record of supporting all these municipal initiatives to help undocumented immigrants. He has some pretty cool ideas when it comes to new policies and new ways to help out. One of his big positions is to crack down on wage theft, which we've been talking about recently. He hopes to extend the City Hall services to help people deal with wage theft. And he's also hoping to expand the Elm City ID program, so it's not just for undocumented immigrants. He's hoping that he could expand it to everyone and make it a little more useful as a debit card, as a library card, as a bus pass, all wrapped into one. He hopes it would let people collect metrics on what services people are using, So it seems like they're both pretty supportive of these initiatives.
Great. So what are the improvements to be made when it comes to immigrant rights in Elm City?
Well, like I said, activists and advocates have been working really hard, and they've actually had a lot of victories, especially in the past just 5-10 years when it comes to immigrant rights. But there's still some things we can do. A first thing people are talking about is making City Hall's resources more accessible to people who don't speak English. People talk about that when they call City Hall or when they call the police department, the person who answers in English, doesn't speak Spanish, which complicates and kind of discourages a dialogue going between immigrant communities and the city. Something advocates are kind of talking about and thinking about pushing forward is to call for bilingual receptionists in Elm City, considering just the very high Spanish-speaking population here and speakers of other languages. Another thing that has been mentioned and talked about, which might be kind of a very good long-term goal, is there's a model right now in Tacoma Park, Maryland, to allow non-citizens to vote in local elections. And considering the stakes that immigrants have in New Haven, this might be a pretty empowering thing for them. And then finally, I guess both candidates are really seriously talking about minimizing wage theft, which has actually become a pretty serious issue in New Haven.
So the Gourmet Heaven wage theft investigation sparked a lot of public talk about this issue. I think what we all really want to know is, where is the city going to go from here? So the Gourmet Heaven wage theft investigation sparked a lot of public talk about this issue. I think what we all really want to know is, where is the city going to go from here?
Well, there's a few ideas out there. Tony Harp has definitely acknowledged this as a pretty serious issue. Hasn't been very too specific about ways to minimize it and move forward. Elliker, on the other hand, has a pretty good idea about this, which is to help immigrants, and well, not just immigrants, anybody dealing with wage theft, help them through the process, because it goes through the State Department of Labor. It can be pretty bureaucratic, requires faxing forms and filling out a lot of information, which might not be easy for some people. So he wanted to direct the online resources and the physical resources of City Hall to help people file for wage theft, because like I said, it's pretty rampant in New Haven. But what a lot of advocates are calling for at this point is a local ordinance that would actually make wage theft punishable at the city level, and that would get the city directly involved, and possibly New Haven Police directly involved in wage theft. They're saying that the Department of Labor sanctions aren't really dramatic enough or serious enough to really seriously discourage systemic wage theft, and that a city ordinance would really help people understand the ramifications of wage theft.
Thank you so much, Sebi, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This has been Madison Allworth for YTV. Thanks for watching.